Blog Talk Radio.
If you feel there's more to life than iPhones and iPads and mindless consumerism, if you're open to receiving information in all forms in any number of ways, if organized religion, organized political movements, and any kind of collectivism doesn't just quite cut it for you, if you engage in critical thinking, if you think for yourself, if you have peace and love in your heart and Jack Daniels in your bloodstream, if you believe that seriousness is a disease, if you're curious, then come, let us go on a journey together as we explore the outer limits of inner truth. And welcome to the Outer Limits of Inner Truth. I'm your host, Ryan, and we have a very incredible guest this evening. He is known as Chapter 36, Mr. Gerald Celente. I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with Mr. Celente, and I can tell you a couple of things. One, he is extremely sharp, and two, his heart is about 10 times the size of the average American's waistline, so you can only fathom how big his heart is. So without further ado, here's our interview with Mr. Celente. Our guest today is Gerald Celente, publisher of the TrendsJournal. He's been forecasting trends since 1980, and he's been coming up with a number of predictions about humanity and the course of human history that he's been completely accurate on. So we are honored to be with him today. Thank you so much for joining us, Gerald.
Oh, thank you. It's very kind of you. Great being with you.
Yeah. My pleasure. Gerald, you'd written a book called What Zizzy Gave Honey Boy that focused on your relationship with your aunt. Can you please discuss what you felt were the most powerful and most significant life lessons she taught you, and how she ultimately would influence your perceptions?
Sure. First of all, the word Zizzy, Z-I-Z-I, that's the Neapolitan dialect for auntie. So Zia is aunt and Zizzy is your auntie. And she was living in Yonkers, New York. May her soul rest in peace. She passed away a few years ago. And I was living up in Rhinebeck, New York, which was about an hour, 45 minutes north of New York City. So on the way back and forth to the city, I try to visit Zizzy as much as possible. Her husband had just died, and my divorce just began. So I had been married for 23 years. So, but I used to visit Zizzy all the time, you know, and I had great aunts and uncles. So what I learned from Zizzy, so many things, but of all the works that I've written in my career, and I've written a lot between the TrendsJournals and my books, this is my favorite of everything that I've ever done, because it really puts things into perspective. So among the many, many, many things that Zizzy taught me, she used to say all the time, now you have to realize this is a woman in her mid-80s, severe phlebitis. She could hardly stand up. She couldn't walk without a walker. And always a smile on her face, always saying a nice word about everyone, never saying anything disparaging about any other person. And she used to say, I'll never forget, she used to say, count your blessings one by one, and you'll see all that God has done. And not God in the religious proselytizing sense, that this is my God, this is the one you have to believe in, but more in a general sense. And what I used to do is when I used to take the train into New York City from Rhinebeck, I'd stop at the Penn Station, and I'd pick her up all these puzzle books and, you know, making connections between different words. And she used to say to me all the time, you know what happens to old people? They lose their minds because they become stupid from watching so much television. You got to keep your mind active. Keep your mind active. She said, I learn something every day. And I never forgot that. And that's what I do as a trend forecaster. I study every day, every day. And even at my darkest times, she always reinforced the belief, have faith in yourself, have confidence in yourself. You know who you are, and you have to reach those greatest potential within you. And again, there were so many other things that tied it all together, because she was of a generation that really, she was born in the early 1900s, so she had a foot back into the past, from her parents and her grandparents, the time before, when they only had horse and buggy, and they were still cooking with, firewood and coal, up to seeing. She used to say, I remember when all the news about Lindbergh. So she saw the past and she saw the present and she saw the future. She was in a unique time. And she used to keep bringing that back, so that you'd have a clear understanding of, we're only a speck of time over here, and we really have no clue what was or what could be. So in doing that, she also instilled the traditions of the past. So, as growing up as an Italian American, my grandfather, may his soul rest in peace, in the Bronx, he had a rabbit run in the back of his house in a garden, and so there was always great food, always great company, people stopping in all the time, and family. So those are the things that we kept, and by the way, very important, that many people today may not be able to relate to. Style, grace, elegance, and beauty. That was the life with Zizi. And my parents, may their souls rest in peace, and my aunts and uncles, everyone was dressed all the time. I came from a family of 7 kids. You were on your own. And my mother, boy, may her soul rest in peace, she used to clean the house in low heels and a beautiful dress on. We didn't have a maid. And everybody was always dressed. And it was always great quality food. So it was about quality, dignity, courage, passion, and self-respect. Those are the things that Zizi kept bringing back to reinforce. And she used to say about my great-grandmother, may her soul rest in peace, I have a photo of her, very elegant-looking woman, very strong. And she said, your great-grandmother was a señora. She knew how to read and write. So those are the things that I got from her, plus many, many, many other things as well.
Okay. And Gerald, humanity's come to know you as a brilliant and passionate individual, and historical records are going to reveal to future generations that you were correct many times on your predictions on trends, on your predictions on events, and your predictions on cultural behavioral shifts. How were you able to make these accurate predictions, and how can other human beings learn this unique skill set that you've had?
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you. Again, it's the roots. And I was taught at a very young age by my dear father, may his soul rest in peace. I was the terror in the family. My mother used to ship me out with my father on weekends, to go when he was going on business. He'd take, come on, let's go. I'd jump in the car with him, and I'd be shooting my mouth off, and he'd look at me, a handsome guy, give me a dirty look, stern, not dirty, but stern, and he'd say to me in Italian, "Pappagallo." Actually, the dialect from the area, Gcelente in Italy, was papawao, which means parrot. He said, "Pappagallo." He said, "Stop repeating what everybody else is saying and think for yourself." And I heard that maybe 5 times. By the time I was a teenager, I knew from my family, my aunts and uncles and grandparents, everybody around, if I was going to say something, I better be speaking from my own mind and from my own knowledge base, not repeating what everybody else was saying. So I realized that in order to speak about something intelligently, I better know the facts. And so that was really my foundation. And also in my other careers, at a graduate school, I was running mayoral campaigns in Yonkers, New York, and Westchester County, which was at that time, Westchester was the richest place in the country. And I got very involved. I became the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate at 23 years old. And I was a chief government affairs specialist in D.C. for the chemical industry, in the 70s. So, I got around. I saw what it looked like. And that's when I became a political atheist. I think for myself.
Okay. Is this when you started to have, at what point in your life would you say you noticed a real rapid change in your own intellectual perceptions that made you different from what the collective values of the culture at the time were? I mean, some point, I think people, they want to fit in and they want to think what everyone else is thinking. When did you really start to break away and to start, being a total individual? Was it when you really started acting on behalf of what your father had told you to think and speak for yourself? Or was there ever a point where you just kind of completely just saying, I'm doing it on my own. I've got this perception and it is my own and I am no longer on the same conscious level as the collective?
Well, it's never total. It's a process. And the advantage of me working within government and doing what I was doing was to see the other side. But there was a wake-up moment, and that was in the late 1970s when the Iranian Revolution was breaking out. And being a student of history, I always enjoyed it very much and an avid reader of it. I knew about the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Mossadegh in 1953 by the CIA and the MI6 in UK, and how they were nationalizing the oil fields, the overthrow of Mossadegh, a university professor, and the brutality of the Savak, the secret police under the Shah, and how they dragged the Shah out of southern France. Yes, I knew all the, and they made him the Shah. I knew the details. It was not all of them, of course, but a lot of them. So when the revolution broke out, I knew it was real. Now, remember, I'm in D.C. at the time, commuting between living in Chicago and D.C. And Jimmy Carter comes back from spending New Year's Eve, he and Rosalind, with the Shah and his wife. And in those days, it was a big deal when the president went overseas. And he comes back from the visit, and they salute as he comes out of the helicopter, goes to the microphones, and he announces to the American people that the Shah is the island of stability in the Middle East. There's a saying we had in the Bronx, BS has its own sound. And I know what BS sounded like. And at that moment is when I became a political atheist. I watched the whole country get caught up in this great big lie. And then I caught myself. And that's really when I became a trend forecaster. I said, what will the implications of this be? And I realized that gold and oil prices would start shooting up. And out of nowhere, I said, I'm going to try to learn how to speculate in those markets. I had no idea what I was doing. I was 33 years old. And that is, by the way, a time, and now, of course, twice that age. There's times in your life when you start growing up. One, I think, is around 28. I'm only speaking for guys. Women are on a different clock. And you start realizing it's around 28. I can't be a kid anymore. Those days are over. And then at 33, 34, you start realizing, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Is this who I really am? And that was what happened to me. But at the same time, I made enough money to quit my job. And that's when I began in 1980, the TrendsResearchInstitute. So, and again, it's a process. I mean, I look back now and what I was thinking then, doing then, the forecasts I was making then, compared to where I am now, it's not even close. I mean, it's like watching, one of my favorite artists is Turner. And you look at Turner's early work, and, it's very graphic. It's very clear. And then you look at him in his later ages, and with a lot of great artists, by the way, and you see it becomes more and more abstract. They say a lot more with a lot less. And that's what the aging process, as I see it, if, again, going back to Zidzi,